Hey, it's James Taylor here. In this video I want to talk to you about the creative personality. We often hear this expression personality types and creative personalities. So what are these kind of creative personalities and these creative personality types? Well, I'd like to break down to you the 10 elements they find in highly creative people. You see, if you watch any of my videos, you know that I believe that everyone has a level of creativity to them. How much you want to explore your levels of creativity is really up to you, but we all have this kernel of creativity within each of us. So what I'm going to be talking to you is about the people who are the very top of what they do, whether it's in the creative industries or they're coming up with new ideas or innovation. So this is the very top. So have a listen to this as I'm talking through and think about yourself and reflect on it yourself. How many of these do you fit into? How many of these do you have? So this very first element I'm going to talk to you is about physical energy. And what you find in creative personalities is they have a certain level of physical energy. And when I say that, I don't mean that they're bouncing off the walls. That's not the point. And in fact, many very creative people, they take lots of naps. Look at Stephen King. He has his afternoon naps, which are now famous. But the point is, when they need to do the work, they have these reserves and they can really focus this physical energy and work for long periods of time if necessary, and very focused when they need to. So they know how to hold back and keep up a storage of energy for themselves so they can direct it into the work that they're doing. The second element is this idea of smart yet naive. What you'll hear in many of these elements is there's contradictions in there. And that's, if you think of it, reflect on yourself as well. If you think about cooking, to have a really creative dish, you want to have spicy and sour. You want to have your salts in there. You want to have those different things, the sharpness as well. So you need to have these different elements. So sometimes contradictory things can work very well, and this is a case in point. Smart yet naive. So among very creative people, they'll have a smartness about them. They'll have an understanding about them. Not necessarily that's the same as IQ or that type of intelligence, but they have a smartness, intelligence about what they're thinking about. But they go into it with a certain sense of naivety, a certain sense of what they call in Zen beginner's mind. And that's great when you see that. They have this information, this knowledge that they've maybe acquired over the years of learning what they do, but when they go into a project, they try not to get too burdened by that and go into it with a child's eyes and go in with a certain level of naivety so they can see something that's going to be new. The third element is they combine playfulness with discipline. This idea of responsibility and irresponsibility. So when you see a very, very creative person at work, often what you can see there's a certain level of discipline of being able to do the task, but they'll go at it with a playfulness, a lightness, a joyfulness in what they're doing. But that's not to say that they're just mucking around. They're not. There's a discipline to what they're doing, a discipline that they've developed over many years at getting good at their trade as well. The fourth element is that they can alternate between imagination and reality. See, one of the reasons that a lot of people don't fulfill their creative potential is they leave it all in their imagination. They leave it all, all these ideas are sitting there, but they never put some reality into it and actually kind of go out there and execute on what they're trying to do and make that visible in the world. But it can go to the other extent, obviously, and we all know those kind of people who, if you come up to them with a new idea, they say, in reality, that's never going to work. So they've closed down the imagination part of them as well. So among great creatives, they have this thing within that's able to have the imagination and also have the quick reality checks on it as well, and be able to balance those two parts. The fifth element, and this is something that goes back to a lot of personality testing. If you've ever done any kind of personality testing, you'll see one of the things that often will grade you on is whether you're introverted or extroverted, and you may have a view on that if you're introverted or extroverted. This is the interesting thing around highly creative people. Often they can be both introverted and extroverted. They can have this ability to, when they're doing certain types of work, to go in to themselves, when having to do other types of work, to kind of go out into the world as well. A classic case in point is if you've ever met some really, really well-known artists and you meet them backstage and you're talking to backstage, and they can often be quite introverted individuals and be a little bit shy. But then you see them on stage and they're up there and they're doing their thing and the ego is bigger than ever. And that's a classic example of introverted and extroverted. Likewise with comedians, many of the great creative comedians, they can do these two things. They're on stage, they're this extroverted, this bigger than anything else, bigger than life personality. But when you speak to them, they have introverted nature because they need to have the introverted part of themselves to be able to get the work done, to write all those lines, to try all those different things. The sixth element is the fact that many highly creative people are both humble and proud. What that means is they don't rest on their laurels. Someone said to me the other day they'd been working with Bob Dylan, and one of the fascinating things about Dylan is that he never looks back. He recognizes that, the great work that he obviously did in his past, but that's not what he's thinking about most of the time. He's thinking about the future. So having this thing, being able to be both proud of the work that you've done and your history and the kind of accomplishments you've had up to this point, but also being humble enough to say, listen, I've built on the shoulders of giants. I'm just part of maybe a lineage in my craft and in my industry and what I'm trying to do. The seventh element I find really interesting, and it's this idea that highly creative people can often escape rigid gender stereotypes. So what do I mean by that? I mean that when you look at very creative males, then you'll often find that they have a lot of very feminine characteristics about themselves. And on the other side, you look at very creative females and they'll have quite masculine characters, more so than the general population. So this is interesting. Why is this the case? Well, I think part of it is that in being creative, you have to kind of open yourself up to new ways of thinking and have a certain level of understanding of the way that other people see things and different ways of structuring things in your head and understanding things. So it's not so black and white. It's not so clear cut. So that's why when they've done the studies, they've often found that people who are highly creative and the gender stereotype is not so hard and fast. The eighth element is another interesting one. The highly creative people are both rebellious and conservative. Rebellious and conservative. How do those two things meet up? Well, if you think about it, in order to get to a certain level in your craft, you have to be a little bit conservative. You have to kind of learn the things, the building blocks. If you're a musician, you have to kind of learn those kind of building blocks, those things to get started. I'm talking about conservative here with obviously a small c. But once you get to that level, once you establish a certain level of knowledge and you've essentially paid your dues, then you have to break out of that. You have to get rebellious. You have to break things. You have to try new things as well. So it's this combination of the two parts of the rebelliousness, but also the conservative element that you've had to initially as you get started is another very interesting element in highly creative personalities. The ninth element is sometimes a controversial one. It's an interesting one, and it's this idea that if you're doing any kind of creative work, you have to be open, you have to be sensitive to the world around you, to what you're trying to do. But this level of openness and sensitivity also opens you up for pain. An example here is if you've ever watched a musician go into maybe somewhere and there's music playing somewhere, maybe there's a musician up on stage and they're not doing a great set and they're playing chords and it's not quite working and they're not hitting notes. You can see the expression of physical pain on that musician's face, because by having to open ourselves out to the world, by having to be more sensitive, whether it's in an auditory way or visual if you're a visual artist, or whatever your particular modality, your particular thing is, you also open yourself up for pain. It's part of the journey, it's part of the thing. We often hear the tortured artist, and I'm not a huge subscriber to that, but there's definitely a kernel of truth there. And the 10th and final element in creative personalities is that they have to be both passionate yet objective. Passionate yet objective. So they have to go into something with a passion, especially when it comes to the creative process. They have to go in and be really passionate about creating ideas, and at the end actually doing those ideas, making those ideas real. But there has to be a level of objectiveness at some point where they say, I have all these ideas, which are the ones that are worth pursuing? Which are the ones worth doing? Which are the ones that just don't cut it really? So they have to have this passionate nature, this passionate thing about their ideas and what they want to do in the world and their creativity, but they must also have a level of objectivity to be able to say, this is what I'm going to focus on just now, this is what I think is valid, this is what I think can work, this is what I'm going to do with my time. So I hope that's been useful, these 10 elements of the creative personality. If you're not watching this video at jamestaylor.me or not listening to this audio at jamestaylor.me, I would love if you go there and leave comments and let me know what you think about this. How many of these different elements have you noticed in your own personality as well? Which of them ring true to you? See you next time. Hi, it's James here. Did you enjoy that episode? If so, there's 2 things that we can do to continue the journey together. Firstly, I would love if you were to subscribe, give us 5 stars and leave a comment. Secondly, if you go to jamestaylor.me and enter your name and email address, I'm going to send you some free goodies all around creativity and innovation. Look forward to continuing the journey together.